Hey guys, it's the Metal Blade 5. Here it is. Everything before has led up to this moment. The moment I've been waiting for. I started these JoJo videos about this time last year. I eventually continued it with videos on Stardust Crusaders and Diamond is Unbreakable. Now, there's only one thing left in the anime. Golden Wind. Like with any part outside of 3 and 4, before watching the anime, I had next to no knowledge of Golden Wind, or Vento Oreo as the part's called in the manga, if that's how you say it. But ever since I had started watching JoJo, where coincidentally the Part 5 anime got confirmed not too long before that, I had been really looking forward to getting to this part, based on what little knowledge I had at the time. And in the end, my anticipation had been correctly placed, as it completely blew me away. I have been super excited to talk about this part because, I'll just say this right now, I love this part. This is honestly my favorite part. Well, as far as the anime is concerned, since I still haven't read the manga. And also the part with the most music references I got on my own, and where I started using only the Japanese names. I've been playing out parts of the script for this video from as early as March. All because I want to ensure I convey the sheer amount of love I have for this part, and fully explain everything I love about it. There's so much I want to discuss that this will be a much longer video than usual. It became my favorite part so quickly after starting that I thought, why did I not hear more about this part in the past? This is awesome! I know that I've talked about spoilers in all my previous JoJo videos, but since this is the most recent part of the anime, with it only ending last month at the time of editing, I'm making a warning that there will be major spoilers in this video, so stop watching if you haven't seen it. I have a very interesting history of Golden Wind. I learned of Part 5's existence a year before I started watching JoJo. I know it was the summer of 2017, where I randomly heard about it on the internet. From this, I learned that the part takes place in Italy. The plot, at least to a small degree from what I was aware, involves the mafia, because of course it would when it's in Italy. The bare basic information on the protagonist, the basic information on the protagonist's stand, and a tiny bit about one other character who I'll keep secret for right now. Then I heard nothing about it until the anime got announced, and all I learned about it after that point was from those short character trailers they released before the anime started airing. And that wasn't until after I started watching JoJo. Now, unlike every other anime I've talked about, I can remember the exact date I started watching Golden Wind. It was the 30th of November, 2018, the day that episode 9 aired. This is because I finished Diamond is Unbreakable on the Monday of that week, and I decided to start Golden Wind on Friday, not just because that's the day when a new episode airs, but also as every Friday I have pizza for tea because it's my favorite food, so I thought it would be fitting to start the part that takes place in Italy on the day I have Italian food. And I got caught up in less than a week. Getting straight into my impressions, a big factor in why this part is my favorite is the main cast. Honestly, I think that this is the best main cast thus far. Now that's not me saying the casts of the previous parts were bad, far from it. I just think that this part's cast is the most fleshed out overall, as each of the main characters' personalities are so developed to the point that you fully understand how their minds work and why they act the way they do for the most part. And the anime dedicates time into covering all of their backstories to further push that point and develop them. All of this is perfectly reflected by our protagonist for this part, Giorno Giovanna. I absolutely love Giorno as a character. While Joseph is personally my favorite JoJo, Giorno is a very, very close second. A big reason being that I really like the concept behind Giorno, and this relates to the one thing I knew about him beforehand. He's Dio's son. When learning about this upon discovering Part 5's existence, it immediately made me fascinated by Giorno's character because I really liked the idea of having the protagonist be the child of the series' main villain. Granted, it isn't the most original idea in the world, but I was still really interested in it as I was fully aware of just how crazy Dio was when I learned about Giorno. and I didn't even have any interest in JoJo at that time. One of the main reasons why I was so excited to get to this part was because I really wanted to see how they executed Giorno's character with that knowledge in mind. And I couldn't be happier with the results. I immediately felt this way upon witnessing Giorno's backstory, as Dio's path towards evil came as a result of his terrible childhood. Well, Giorno's childhood was actually worse than Dio's, as his mum neglected him, his stepdad would constantly abuse him, and he was repeatedly bullied by other kids. Because he was treated like scum, this almost created a self-fulfilling prophecy. That was until he saved the life of an unnamed gangster, who used his position to stop all the bad things happening to Giorno and ensuring that he was treated kindly. I love the story that Giorno easily could have ended up exactly like Dio, but that gangster saving him from all his suffering ultimately led Giorno down a path towards good, and that being used to set up Giorno as the protagonist is amazing in my eyes. Being saved by gangsters also resulted in Giorno developing his life's dream that he constantly bangs on about. To become a gang star. Yeah, not exactly sure what defines a gang star, but based on what the part presents, I assume it means an honorable gangster, one who doesn't deal drugs, especially not to women and children, leading to Giorno's mission of infiltrating the mafia organization Passione to overthrow its corrupt boss. What I love about Giorno also stems from his personality, as in some ways he does take after his old man. Like Dio, he is relentless in battle and perfectly content in killing his opponents. This, combined with Giorno's dream still being related to the criminal underworld, doesn't make him the most ethically just protagonist. But generally, I prefer more morally grey characters, as they can have more personal motives and not be evil, whilst doing the more cool things you usually see bad guys do. And my feelings on this also apply to the rest of the main characters. I think Giorno does this so well, and I find it cool to see some of Dio's behavior, but used towards more good purposes, which is what I hoped when I learned that he's Dio's son in the first place. But as Dio was using Jonathan's body when getting it on with Giorno's mum in some weird threesome, Giorno is technically a Joestar as well, and as such he also inherited some of Jonathan's traits, most notably his polite nature and pure selflessness. While Giorno is okay with killing, he refuses to kill someone when he can tell that they're a good person, and he shows nothing but respect to his allies. So much so that he's even willing to let himself get injured if it means giving himself or his allies an advantage in battle. While I am aware that there are people who think Giorno is boring, and given his more reserved nature, I can kinda see where they're coming from, but with his duality against Dio, his grayer morality, and the complexity of his personality with him being a combination of Jonathan and Dio's traits makes me love his character. Obviously, as he's Dio's son, Giorno naturally has a stand. Gold Experience! Gold Experience has to be one of my favorite stands in the whole series, with one of the main reasons being that it further reflects how Giorno ended up differently to Dio. While Dio wanted nothing but power and to kill or destroy anything that stood in his way, Gold Experience is the stand of life. Anything that it hits gets imbued with life energy. This is primarily done to turn inanimate objects into living creatures, be it plant or animal. Plus, any attack delivered towards Gold Experience's creations is deflected back at the attacker. Later on, Giorno even develops the ability to turn objects into body parts to act as a form of healing. Not only that, but whenever a person is hit by Gold Experience, the life energy causes their senses to go berserk, giving them an out-of-body experience and greatly amplifying the pain they feel. Seeing all these abilities made me realize just how awesome Gold Experience is with how versatile and effective it can be in combat. Now Heaven's Door has competition for which stand I would want. Something else is that, like Giorno himself, Gold Experience also has a trait that applies to the rest of the main characters. All the main characters' stands have far more unconventional abilities, which I really like as it makes them both unique and greatly enhances the fight scenes. Most of the fights in this part feel extremely strategic with how the characters plan out and utilize their unconventional abilities in all sorts of creative ways to defeat their opponents in a more unexpected yet awesome manner. Every fight in this part stands out in my mind partially because of that, and all of the main character stands are among my favorites in the series partly for those reasons. In order to enter Passione and remove the boss from power, Giorno needs help from an existing member. Bruno Bucciarati. Bruno is the deuteragonist, but most of the time he feels more like the protagonist than Giorno. But you're not gonna get any complaints out of me. Bruno is such a deep character, and I think he's one of the best examples of how this part can make you understand how they think. A question I frequently had in my mind is, why did he join Passione in the first place if he's against the boss stealing drugs? But then it all made sense when they finally showed his backstory, as oddly Bruno is the last of all the main characters to have his backstory detailed. His dad was gunned down for witnessing a drug deal, which forced him to join Passione for protection. This caused Bruno to develop a deep hatred for any drug-related acts, and upon discovering that the boss was trafficking drugs, he lost respect for the boss, with the last bit of whatever respect he may have had left diminishing throughout the first half of the part. From there, I completely understood why Bruno acted the way he did. He was against the boss's actions, but still owed him a debt for taking him in, which made him hesitant to oppose him. That is, until he met Giorno. Giorno's ambition is what inspires Bruno to take a stand. I'm a big fan of the dynamic between the two, as Bruno does share similarities with Giorno, namely him striving to be honorable and righteous despite his position as a gangster, where he'll continually fight to uphold what he believes is right. I also love how Bruno carries out his role as the leader of the team as, like Giorno, he greatly respects the members of his team and values their lives above all else. Furthermore, he plays an active role in the rest of his team's backstories by being the person who inevitably guided them all to joining Passione, further cementing him as their strong leader from how much loyalty they show towards him as thanks for supporting them and showing his own selflessness by saving them from their suffering. Obviously, Bruno needs to maintain a serious mentality when acting out his role, but fortunately his caring attitude towards his team shows that he isn't super strict. Plus, Bruno is just so cool when he's not licking people, as seen by how absolutely ruthless he is in battle to give all of his opponents an awesome defeat. And he wouldn't be able to accomplish that if it wasn't for his stand. Sticky Fingers! This stand has such a cool ability despite how weird it is in concept. Sticky Fingers has the power to create zippers on anything it punches. These zippers can then be used for various means. Commonly they're used to pass through objects, but among others they can attach things together, and as an attack, Bruno uses them to dismember people and objects. I love how versatile its ability is, even with the weird yet simple idea. Now we have another contender for what stand I would want, because I can think of many practical uses for this. As part of entering Passione, Giorno ends up against the human version of Jabba the Hutt and his stand Black Sabbath, where it's revealed that Passione has a stand arrow in their possession. Much like what I said about Morio in Diamond is Unbreakable, I really like the idea of Passione being a mafia where most of its notable members are stand users. Though that's kind of a given, as it's the case for all characters in Part 3 and onwards. With it being revealed just before Giorno joins Passione, it does a great job of building up how dangerous the organization is and what kind of opponents are expected to appear later on. After passing Polpo's test, Giorno joins Bruno's team, where we then get introduced to the rest of the team. Now, this puts me in a tough situation, as we get 4 main characters introduced at the exact same time. So after some debate, I decided to give my impressions in the order that their backstories are covered. So following that order, the first is Leone Abbacchio. Abbacchio is by far the most serious member of the team, as he has such a grim and bleak outlook on life, which I think is really good at showing the clear darker side to the overall gang setting. I also like how they explain his somber mood through his backstory. He's a former police officer who lost his faith in the justice system due to corruption and the general public being incredibly ungrateful towards the police. This loss of faith resulted in him taking a bribe from a criminal, as he thought arresting him would be pointless since he'd get off lightly. But then that same criminal went on to kill Abbacchio's partner, and he got fired. With Abbacchio blaming himself for his partner's death, he aimlessly wandered the streets wallowing in misery and regrets, until Bruno offered him a place in Passione. Everything about Abbacchio's cold personality stems from being haunted by his mistakes, and this is perfectly shown by his attitude being very fatalistic, in the sense that he always looks on the darker side of things in serious situations. For instance, he would prefer being left behind to die if it meant the team succeeds in the mission, and he also pushes this belief when anyone else is in that situation. Not because he doesn't care, but because he thinks doing the opposite wouldn't be beneficial. While he is pretty secluded in his feelings, he is relaxed and appears to be a tiny bit more upbeat when casually interacting with the team. Especially Bruno. But that's putting Giorno aside, as Abbacchio hates him for some reason. At first I thought it was that he didn't trust him with him being the newbie and all, but the way he speaks to Giorno at times makes me feel like it goes way deeper than that. He made him drink his piss when they first met. All of their scenes can be summed up like this. I, Giorno Giovanna, have a dream.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
Lastly, there is also Abbacchio's stand, Moody Blues. This thing has the power to replay past events by imitating a person's actions through those events. Abbacchio can also control the replay by pausing and fast-forwarding, for example. This ability effectively makes the stand purely support-based and unsuitable for combat, but I like how it references Abbacchio's previous career by being used for investigating suspicious events. However, what I think I like the most about Moody Blues is how it reflects Abbacchio's psyche, as its ability references both how Abbacchio wishes he could go back and do things differently to save his partner, and him constantly replaying those events in his head. Next up is Guido Mista. Mista is a very laid-back and quirky individual a lot of the time, but combined with how much of a tough guy he is in battle makes him so awesome in my eyes. The laid-back part of his character really brings out the fun chemistry between the group, as he's one of the members that is most involved in their light-hearted interactions during their casual moments when there isn't any immediate danger around. Something else that I really love about this part's cast. But when danger is afoot, playing the role of the team's sharpshooter, Mr. will go all out against the enemy no matter what, usually with the intent to kill them as soon as possible. Mr. is a beast in battle, as he's able to take severe injuries, some of which should be fatal, and still keep going. His sheer resilience just makes him even more awesome to me. However, when it comes to Mr.'s quirkiness, that is fully displayed by his greatest fear. The number 4. Whether it be the number itself or something being in a quantity of 4, it makes him incredibly paranoid, as he's had a strong belief ever since childhood that the number is cursed and that its presence or interacting with something from 4, or really anything that has to do with the number, will bring misfortune to whoever is involved. So I'd imagine that he'd shit himself if he realized that he's the 4th character I'm giving my impressions on in this video. As for Mr.'s backstory, he killed these 3 guys with the worst aim I have ever seen in my entire life when protecting a woman that they were attacking. But the court didn't see his actions as self-defense, and he got sentenced to, at most, 30 years in prison. But Bruno managed to have Mr.'s verdict changed, and upon being released, he immediately accepted Bruno's offer to join his team. I guess he didn't care if he'd potentially end up being the 4th member. Mr. probably has some of the best fights in the part due to all the cool ways they incorporate his marksman skills. Even with a straightforward approach of just shooting things, they still manage to make him act pretty strategically in a lot of fights. And this is thanks to the use of his stand. Sex Pistols. This stand is comprised of 6 small sentient beings that ride on Mr.'s bullets. Whenever Mr. fires, the pistols can kick his bullets to change their trajectory in mid-flight to better hit their target. And with multiple pistols kicking simultaneously, they can increase the speed and power of the bullets as well. The way their power is executed can make some fights crazy with how they can change a single bullet's trajectory in all sorts of directions. Plus, they each have their own distinct personality, which are all just goofy and fun to watch. Though as they're a stand, I don't know why they need to eat. Next is Izuku Midoriya. I mean, Narancia Gyurga. Totally different. This is where the characters' ages get extremely questionable. Narancia is 17, but I almost always forget that, as he certainly doesn't act like one, and I can't help but see him as the child of the group because of that. Narancia is an idiot when it comes to anything aside from combat, as he never received a proper education, but he's probably the most fun character to watch during casual moments in my opinion due to his lack of maturity, mainly seeing him slacking off and listening to rap music. I get a lot of fun out of watching Narancia just being his normal, stupid self because of how funny his childish antics can be. However, he's also a very rough individual since he has a quick temper which can lead to some pretty violent outbursts against his opponents, and leaving large amounts of destruction during his battles from how off the rails he can go. But it's a completely different story when around his allies, as Narancia can be quite innocent, kind, and selfless in those situations, and seeing his backstory on how he ended up as a gangster made me feel pretty sad. When he was young, his mum died from an eye infection, and his dad became incredibly neglectful towards him. This led Narancia to getting involved with a bad crowd who backstabbed him by framing him for beating up an old lady, and then abandoned him when he got released. To make matters worse, one of the police officers attacked him, which resulted in him getting an eye infection, so he was left living on the streets thinking he would die. But he was found, and Bruno paid to have his infection cured. As Bruno was the only person that showed him genuine kindness after his mother's death, Narancia greatly looks up to him and wanted to work for him so bad that he joined Passione behind his back. I never really got why everybody on the internet calls Narancia a trap, as while he does look a bit feminine, I could tell he was a dude straight away. Though I guess part of that does have to do with the reference behind his stand. Aerosmith. When first seeing Narancia's character trailer, I thought, what the hell, it's a fucking toy plane. But its appearance hides how strong it is. As it's specifically a fighter plane, it comes equipped with infinite ammo machine guns and a bomb. While small in size, these weapons are still deadly. In fact, Aerosmith's size helps it be very nimble and good at tracking. It also has a radar that detects carbon dioxide emissions as to help with tracking and scouting the area for threats. I take back what I thought about the stand when I first saw it. It's actually really cool. And then there is Panna Cotta Fugo. Poor Fugo! He got screwed over in this part, but I'll talk about that a little later. Fugo is effectively the brains of the team, as he's easily the smartest one and even tutors Narancia to help him with his lack of education, and is shown to be very protective of him as well. Normally Fugo is a pretty chill dude as he regularly mingles with the rest of the team and holds them all to high regard as well, even Giorno. On the other hand though, Fugo has really bad anger issues. When something mildly annoys him, he can go into a furious and violent rage that not only surpasses Narancia's quick temper, but is probably greater than Josuke's after someone insults his hair. He's like a completely different person in these scenarios, but Fugo doesn't hold himself to a high regard as he's fully aware of how bad his anger issues are and appears to have a great deal of hatred towards himself because of it, partially due to how it's impacted his life. Fugo was so smart that he was able to enroll in university at 13. However, one of the professors was sexually harassing him. This caused Fugo to pen up a lot of his violent rage, which then got unleashed as that professor was trying to seduce him. His family used their wealth to ensure he was found innocent, but they immediately disowned him. And I imagine the pedo professor got off from the law scot-free. With nowhere left to go, he eventually bumped into Bruno, who encourages him to join his team. What I find interesting about Fugo is that I believe he's the first character in the series to actually hate his stand powers because of the danger posed by his stand. Purple Haze. This thing is Fugo's rage manifested in physical form, as this is one of the deadliest stands in all of JoJo. It has capsules on its knuckles, which it can shoot by the way, and when one of these capsules breaks, it releases a flesh-eating virus that infects any living thing in its range and rapidly spreads through the victim's body, effectively making them rot from inside out. I honestly love this stand for how deadly it is. I really like the virus-based powers for how creative it is, and its deadliness just makes it so powerful and fun to watch it massacre everything, and it has a really cool design to boot. I get so hyped and tense whenever it's on screen. Well, that is, if it got used more than once. This takes me to why Fugo got screwed. At around the halfway point of the series, when Bruno announces his betrayal of the boss, Fugo is the only member of the team that doesn't go with him. Pussy. You have no idea how much this bummed me out. I really liked Fugo's character, as I thought his hatred of himself was quite unique, and he played a major role in the team's history, being the first person Bruno recruited and the one who found the rancher, which made it weird to see him leave. I hear that part of the reason why Fugo stayed behind was because the rest of the team could accept their flaws, while he still couldn't accept his anger. But if I was writing this, I would have Bruno or Giorno give some advice for the future, like, your anger doesn't define you, it's what you do, and that makes Fugo a little more accepting of who he is, which encourages him to go with them. I really wanted Fugo to get that kind of character arc of learning to accept himself and his stand, since that's how I felt every time he showed his self-loathing, and he's pretty much Bruce Banner. He's a smart guy with anger issues who hates his powers. He's basically Bruce Banner. I would have loved if, say, in the final battle, we had a moment like this.
Fugo.
Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Bucciarati. I'm always angry.
Additionally, as you'd guess, I really wanted to see more of Purple Haze as well due to how much I like it. While I get why Fugo rarely uses it, I think you could easily write situations where it could be used, such as Fugo being in a one-on-one fight where there were no bystanders. I am aware of the reason why Araki had Fugo leave, and I perfectly understand it, but it still bugs me nonetheless, as it made me think Fugo was ultimately a pointless character due to how little he contributed to the story. And before people bring this up in the comments, I am actually reading Purple Haze feedback, but its canonicity is questionable as Araki didn't write it. Anyway, something else about all the main characters in this part is that I loved how they're all misfits. Society casted them out, which inevitably led to them joining Passione, but together they shall rise up to bigger and better things with their second chance, breaking through everything that gets thrown at them despite the odds to change the status quo set by the boss. Not only do I think this helps make each character relatable, but it reminds me of the Phantom Thieves. This is backed up by the gang's overall dynamic, where the story really feels like a group effort through their shared resolve and support, and have all sorts of fun antics like torturing people through the medium of dance! And, most importantly, sucking each other's dicks.
Every time I close my eyes, I wake up feeling so horny.
But there is one more main character I have yet to talk about. As upon getting caught up with episode 9, I saw the moment when Bruno is promoted to a capo, and the team immediately receives a mission. To protect the boss's daughter, Trish Una. Trish was actually the other character I heard about. All I knew was that she's the daughter of a mafia boss, and that she has pink hair. I didn't know what she actually looked like until seeing the opening, and I had no idea she was the daughter of the boss of Passione. When learning that, I was concerned, thinking, oh god, is she actually evil? But was relieved when being told that she's never met the boss in her life. Instead, when she's first introduced, she demands that the guys buy her all sorts of stuff and being very picky about what she wants. This made me think, oh, she's gonna be really spoiled and annoying throughout, isn't she? But eventually, I was so overjoyed to see that wasn't the case. Turns out that Trish suffers from a lot of insecurities, and her early actions were a way of simply hiding her anxiety from the situation she's been thrown into. Then as I thought about it more throughout the first half of the series, I realized that her anxiety made a lot of sense. Immediately after her mum dies, she gets picked up by the mafia, forced to go with a bunch of strangers whilst constantly being hunted down, and all to be handed over to a dad she's never met. Especially seen when she has a panic attack before being delivered to the boss, with it then being revealed that the boss actually wants to kill her so she can't be used to discover his identity. It made me feel really bad for her, and I started liking her a bit more and more because of that. For some reason, I also got the impression that her mum may have been a bit overprotective of her, which would make her more uneased when she's not around. Trish's anxiety and self-doubt is something I found very relatable as someone who's never confident in their ability on anything, and gets anxious very easily. This comes to the forefront during the Notorious Big arc in the second half, where Trish believes that she lacks the same strength and motivation as the others. She wants to save Giorno's newly forming hand so that he, Mr. Narancia, can recover, but she feels useless in the situation. Then she awakens her stand. Spice Girl. Because of this, she gains much greater confidence and defeats Notorious Big. I loved the Spice Girl episode, because I thought it was so awesome to see Trish go from being the scared girl to a complete badass, with the gradual transition across the episode being done so well alongside Spice Girl repeatedly encouraging her, which I admittedly was doing as well. From then on, she not only becomes a proper member of the team, but a very helpful one at that, becoming much friendlier and loyal to the guys, as well as keeping her new determined nature. Her character growth is actually pretty similar to Koichi's. Now for Spice Girl's abilities. She has the power to make anything she hits soft, which sounds shit, but she makes things so soft that they become highly elastic and thus unbreakable. It is the perfect ability for defense, as objects can't be broken or damaged, and any weapon struck will become so soft that they can't be used to harm anybody. It's a super cool power, and I love how creative the idea is. Somewhere out there, I can hear Josuke screaming right now. So ultimately with Trish, I went from thinking she'd be annoying to really liking her. She's best girl in my opinion so far. With all our bizarrely dressed main characters together, they must head to Venice while being hunted by defected Passione members. The Hitman team. I think that these guys are the best group of minor antagonists in the series. For starters, as the name suggests, they are former Passione hitmen, an idea I'm a big fan of as it further plays into the setting up of how dangerous Passione and just the bad guys in general are by the thought of them being highly adept in killing through being ordered to do so. With their members including the likes of Kazuma, Icy Bakugo, and what the fuck is with his head? He looks like a carrot! Another thing I like about them is how their stands display their deadliness, as they're all perfectly suited to assassinations. Yes, even the one that's a fucking fishing rod. They also have more unconventional abilities to add even more strategy to the fights. But the biggest reason why I believe the Hitman team stand above the rest of the minor antagonists is that they are given a backstory. They tried to find out the boss's identity, but had two of their members brutally killed as punishment. So upon learning about Trish, they plan to kidnap her, use her to find the boss, and kill him for revenge. This informs me of why they are doing this and actually makes me empathize with them, whereas most of the minor antagonists in the previous part had next to or no backstory or motivation for what they did. I legitimately felt some degree of remorse when seeing them defeated since they had suffered from the boss as well. I also like how this foreshadows just how evil and cruel the boss is to make the moment when Bruno's team inevitably have to confront him all the more tense. Part of what makes the Hitman team so developed in my eyes is that they are almost a reflection of Bruno's team. They each have their own quirks and they look out for each other, as when one of them dies, it affects their morale. But most of all is that they both ultimately have the same goal of wanting to take down the boss. It makes me think that under different circumstances, they could have been allies. Still, they are trying to kill us, so we need to kill them in epic fashion. When getting to this point, and trying to alleviate the wait for each new episode, I came to a realization. I don't really talk about music in these videos, but I have to say that this part's soundtrack is fucking phenomenal. It's full of banging tunes that both set the tone for the scenes they're used in, and the really energetic tracks get you extremely pumped when the characters start getting an upper hand in the fights. It made it difficult for me to decide what tracks I wanted to use in this video aside from the obvious choices, and it's probably the only non-video game soundtrack I repeatedly go out of my way to listen to. You won't believe how much I listen to Fighting Gold and Il Vento d'Oro in my spare time. Anyway, upon reaching Venice and Bruno learning that the boss wants to kill Trish, Bruno loses what little respect he still had for the boss and attempts to assassinate him. With the boss showing up, I thought, at this point he doesn't seem to be too interesting of a villain, but I find the idea that a lot of the evil things he does coming as a result of him being super paranoid about people finding out about his identity to be pretty unique. And I like how he's presented as this unknown individual in the shadows to make him a constant looming threat. Unfortunately, Bruno's assassination attempt doesn't go so well, as he is overpowered by the boss's stand. King Crimson! I heard the name of this stand years ago because they referenced it in No Game No Life, although I didn't know it was a JoJo reference at the time. And after I started watching, all I learned about it was what it looked like and heard about its power. But I wasn't expecting to see it here, so I had an overhaul moment where I freaked out upon seeing it emerge from the shadows. I think King Crimson is the most intimidating villain stand in the series thus far. Yes, even more than the World and Killer Queen, mainly due to its ability. King Crimson has the power to erase time! When hearing about this, I thought it could, for example, erase the moment you were born to wipe you from existence. However, I was wrong. Now, I am aware of the running joke in the fandom of how does King Crimson work? But honestly, this may be due to how the anime portrays its ability, but I found it really easy to understand. I see King Crimson as like the hand, but with time. When it activates its ability, everything enters this slowed down state where only the boss can move freely and has some level of clairvoyance. And this is the time that gets erased, where it just skips ahead from everyone else's perspective, and only the boss is aware of what happened in that time. This makes King Crimson exceptionally deadly, as the boss primarily erases time to dodge his opponent's attacks and place himself in an advantageous position so that when the opponent is confused by what happened, he can use King Crimson's sheer strength to decimate them, making the boss virtually untouchable. As Bruno is severely injured, I kept thinking, how are you still alive? You've lost so much blood, and I'm sure that karate chop must have sliced your heart in half. But that seems to catch up, as after managing to escape, Bruno dies. And then is immediately okay. Wait, what? What was with the massive troll there? You actually had me for a minute. But later in the episode, when it's shown that Bruno is now hardly able to feel pain and bleeds much less now, I started thinking, is Bruno like a zombie now? With my suspicions being confirmed much later on, as when Bruno seemingly died, he did in fact die, and Gold Experience's life energy reanimated his corpse. It's a very interesting way of handling a character death, I'll say that. But from my suspicions and its reveal, I got a bad feeling about what to expect at the end of this part. With the team, minus Fugo, betraying the boss, I entered the second half of the series, where their objective is to find out the boss's identity by heading from Venice to Sardinia, while the boss sends his elite guard to kill them. Once again, strongly building up the minor antagonists by detailing that they're all high-ranking Passione members who were chosen to protect the boss and destroy any traitors. What kinds of cruel, relentless stand users will the gang encounter? Pfft, you serious? They look like they're in a fucking Pilates video! Also, I'm pretty sure that they're gay for each other. Then there's the aforementioned Notorious Big, an invincible stand that lives even after the user has died. In fact, dying seems to be how its ability activates, which makes me wonder, how the fuck did he know how his stand works? Then arriving in Sardinia, I got a big revelation through the introduction of another antagonist. Vinegar Doppio. I saw a lot of people getting excited by this guy when he showed up in the second opening, but I had no idea why. Then I learned in his first appearance. He is the boss, or rather, an alternate personality of the boss. Turns out, the boss has a major split personality disorder, where on one side you have the cold, prideful personality of the boss, who seeks to eliminate the past to remove all traces of his identity, and on the other you have Doppio, who is a more cowardly individual that is fiercely loyal to the boss, and thinks that everything is a phone. This immediately resolved my concerns of the boss not being interesting, as it shows his shattered mind and how it works, where, to me, it seems he's had this split personality ever since birth, but only in his teenage years did the boss personality become the dominant one, which led him and Doppio down the path of evil. It also appears that the boss is aware that he and Doppio are the same person, but Doppio isn't. I think this is a cool way of having the boss be involved in trying to stop the gang while still hiding his identity. Especially since turning into Doppio somehow makes him look like a teenager to give the middle finger to anti-aging cream. However, before Doppio can try to stop Bruno's team, he instead ends up fighting against Risotto Nero and his stand Metallica, which has magnetic powers over any form of iron, including the iron found in people's blood. I'm surprised that Risotto doesn't fight any of the main characters considering he's the leader of the Hitman team. Hell, I actually think it would be kind of interesting if Trish fought him, as Spice Girl could soften Metallica's iron construct so that they can't hurt people, and it would be her getting back at the Hitman team for trying to kidnap her. But then we wouldn't have gotten this battle, which takes the cake for the goriest fight in the whole series, as Risotto creates bladed objects inside Doppio's body, including a pair of scissors in his throat, where it was very difficult for me to keep looking at the screen as it moves underneath his skin and he has to pull them out. Plus, this fight was an instance of random facts I learned from JoJo, as apparently when someone's body runs out of iron, their blood turns yellow and they can't breathe. Then my feelings quickly turned to dread, as just when Risotto was about to win, he gets shot by Aerosmith, as Doppio tricked the gang into thinking Risotto was attacking them. When he first got shot, I thought, please don't tell me that's what I think it was. For once, I didn't want the main characters to be the bad guy. Then I got excited again when Risotto tried his desperation technique, but the boss took over and erased time to avoid getting shot. That feeling of dread continued and soon turned to sorrow. Abbacchio's death left me utterly devastated. I was somehow able to keep my composure, but internally I was just like Narancia. While it had been built up, I didn't expect the death itself to be so sudden like that, so I was left completely silent and shocked when watching the scene. And seeing the team get cruelly ripped apart, and how Abbacchio's death affects the others was just heartbreaking. I never cry at fictional stuff because I have no soul, but this moment brought me so close. Seeing Bruno having to maintain a strong face as the leader whilst being grief-stricken as Narancia bursts into tears was so painful to watch, with them having to leave Abbacchio's body lying there in order to continue the mission. Just like how he said he'd rather get left behind before. The whole moment hit me so hard that for like the next 2 weeks I was like, I'm just not in the mood to watch Golden Wind videos right now. Although, I did breathe a massive sigh of relief when seeing that just before Abbacchio died, Moody Blues finished its replay and left an imprint of the boss's face, making me feel a little better knowing that his death wasn't in vain. And it seems he might have finally trusted Giorno for once. That also applied to Abbacchio getting closure to his pain, as he is reunited with his partner in the afterlife, who tells him that he did a good job and that he's proud of him, allowing him to pass on peacefully. You know, if it wasn't for the next week airing a recap episode, I would have had some serious mood whiplash as I reacted to the next proper episode, as the team are contacted by an anonymous person. I recognize that voice! This totally mysterious contact informs the gang of a special kind of stand arrow, unofficially known as the Requiem arrow, the original one that all others are based on, and holds the way of defeating King Crimson, with it being arranged to meet each other and obtain the arrow at the Roman Colosseum. But on the way, they are attacked by the last of the boss's elite guard, Chocolata and his partner Secco. I'd say these two are probably the most developed minor antagonists after the Hitman team, as they are also given a backstory. Before joining Passione, Chocolata was a killer doctor who murdered many of his patients because he takes pleasure out of watching people die. which he follows whenever he is ordered to kill someone, while Sekko is one of his former patients who somehow became incredibly loyal to him and acts as his pet, or at least that's how it seems at first. Together, they are considered the lowest scum of all of Passione, and following on from that is another thing that I like about them as antagonists, being that they have an exceptionally deadly combination of stands. Chocolata's stand, Green Day, creates a flesh-rotting mold on any living creature as it descends in altitude, which spreads across a wide area, while Sekko's stand, Oasis, lets him liquefy the ground to primarily swim underground, but also to make people sink and thus get hit by the mold. This is shown in their fights, as while Giorno and Mista go against Chocolata in his convenient helicopter, they have the constant threat of the mold looming over them as they have to ensure they don't fall down, which really put me on edge. This fight also made me even more bummed out by the Fugo situation, as I realized that a Purple Haze vs Green Day fight would have been so cool given that they have pretty similar abilities. But that's not to say that this fight is bad. Not in any way, shape, or form. As in the end, Giorno gives Chocolata the most epic finish that puts all of the previous antagonist defeats to shame. Both this part and everything before. I thought the Steely Dan beatdown was awesome, but I had seen nothing yet. When watching this part, I had repeatedly heard mention of the 7-page Muda, but finally getting to see it myself was so frickin' astounding. With Giorno's thing of only killing those he sees as evil, combined with how twisted Chocolata is, made the whole moment of him unleashing everything he had on him just the most crazy, satisfying, and hype-inducing moment of this part that might just be better than sex. Particularly the minigun sound effect during the Re part. It was amazing! While not having as epic of a finish, Bruno's battle against Sekko showed him make an incredible comeback from such an uphill battle, despite his condition worsening. And I honestly laughed really hard upon seeing Sekko end up in the exact same bin lorry as Chocolata. However, a lot of my hype gained from the 7-page Muda was extended by that next episode due to the reveal of the anonymous contact.
12年前、エジプトでの闘争の後手に入れたこの矢のもたらす恐怖は彼らが来なくては終わることはない。
Polnareff! Words cannot express how stoked I was to see him again, even if he's not in the best shape now. On top of that, his character growth from Stardust Crusaders is further displayed here, as he's matured substantially and has become much more serious and level-headed. With that being a large part of what I loved about his character, I was so happy to see it get further expanded on here. I was greatly anticipating the forthcoming team-up of all these awesome stand users, but was then left incredibly nervous as Doppio arrived at the same time. Here was the moment when I witnessed the formal reveal of the boss's true identity. Diavolo. Literally the Italian word for devil. The whole reveal sent chills down my spine from how much of an oh shit moment it was. They somehow managed to make a dude with long pink hair scary, even if he's dressed like a male stripper. It turns out that Diavolo was the one who discovered the stand arrows in the first place, and kept one for himself to establish Passione. Polnareff attempted to investigate Passione with the aim of recovering their arrow, but it resulted in him being crippled by Diavolo. This is what made me fully see just how interesting Diavolo is as a villain. Even after all the development I'd seen through Doppio, just because of how big of a deal they made him to be, as he is indirectly responsible for the events of Stardust Crusaders and Diamond is Unbreakable, as well as Stan's simply appearing in the first place. This also made me realize that out of all the villains so far, Diavolo is the one who has been the most directly active in stopping the main characters, rather than remaining out of action for the majority of the part. Not just with Bruno's team, but Polnareff as well. That further plays into why I think he's a great villain, as it emphasizes that constant looming threat aspect I talked about earlier. Polnareff ends up in a rematch against Diavolo, but even yeeting himself to escape doesn't do much good. So he resorts to using the Requiem arrow on Silver Chariot. However, that doesn't prevent him from being punched through the chest. No, Polnareff, you can't die! Not after all you've been through! But before any sadness could truly sink in, I was taken aback upon seeing what the Requiem arrow does. When a stand is pierced by the Requiem arrow, it transforms into a far stronger form, turning Silver Chariot into Chariot Requiem. Now it follows a notorious big approach by carrying on Polnareff's will to protect the arrow at all costs, and has the primary ability of soul manipulation, where it causes everybody to swap souls with each other, with Bruno's soul even ending up in Diavolo's body. I found this moment to be both hilarious and a massive mindfuck, as I had to keep reminding myself that they swapped bodies whenever they weren't using their stands, as I kept calling them by the wrong name. Except Bruno, of course. Then the trippiness continued as I saw that Polnareff swapped souls with Coco Jumbo to become a talking turtle. Polnareff informs the gang that in order to claim the arrow, they need to destroy Chariot Requiem. But as they're all getting their bearings and everything seems safe, time skips ahead. I got so panicky when seeing the King Crimson affair. Guys? Where's Narancia?
Narancia?
Despite Gold Experience healing Narancia's wounds, Giorno's body is now an empty shell, as the impalement was instant death. Whatever was left of my already fragmented spirit after Abbacchio's death was completely destroyed by Narancia's death. Because I love Narancia, I really wanted to see him get a happy ending, and combined with how I always saw him as the kid of the group, it made him getting torn away from the others so suddenly all the more devastating for me. What further added to the sheer sadness this scene gave me was how Narancia didn't even have a chance to defend himself or prevent his death in any way. He was taken out in a surprise attack while time was being erased. Plus, unlike Abbacchio, Narancia didn't get any closure to his hardships and died in vain as he was unable to help the team or leave them any hope to press on during his final moments. I came so goddamn close to crying. It felt like I had been stabbed in the heart by that fence. They even show Fugo again! And the moment when you see Aerosmith flying away, that is what brought me on the verge of tears, where I desperately had to hold them back. Then the next day, I came across a video comparing the scene to the manga. It was just as painful the second time round. So it turns out that as Doppio and Diavolo are different personalities, they have separate souls. That's not how split personalities work, but okay. So Doppio ended up in Bruno's body as it runs out of life energy, while Diavolo's soul went somewhere else. At first I thought that Diavolo ended up in the body of a random civilian, as it would be like trying to find an invisible needle in a haystack. But in actuality, he wound up in Mista's body alongside Trish, because he can somehow do that. And while this does lead to another moment of Trish being a badass, which I really liked as she fights back against his control, Diavolo retaliates with the most absurd strategy I have ever seen. He fists his daughter and uses the knockback to send himself flying towards the arrow. Fortunately, in the nick of time, Bruno destroys Chariot Requiem to send everybody's souls back to their original bodies. But as Bruno's body has run out of life energy, his soul has nowhere to go but to pass on. I had seen this coming for a long time, but that still doesn't prevent this moment from stinging any less. I felt tense whenever Bruno's zombified state had been brought up after its confirmation, especially when seeing how much his body had deteriorated just before the soul swapping. So getting to this part was like being put out of my misery in such a saddening way, especially seeing the way Giorno reacts to the situation with how his voice and body trembles. The way this scene is conveyed reminds me a lot of Joseph's death near the end of Stardust Crusaders. Except in this case, I know he's not coming back. Arrivederci, Bruno. Giorno, I know, and I think you know too, what you have to do now. Giorno pierces Gold Experience with the Requiem arrow. However, it seemingly rejects him as it appears to backfire, but I guess the arrow is a massive troll as things begin to change. This whole setup sequence got me so incredibly pumped for the spectacle that awaited.
Requiem だ。
あれはジョルノのレクイエム。ゴールドエクスペリエンスレクイエム。
As part of me hearing the basics of Gold Experience when I first discovered Part 5, I had heard of Gold Experience Requiem. However, I was under the assumption that it was the JoJo equivalent to an awakened persona. Simply a power-up. Well, on top of being a powered-up version of Gold Experience, Requiem gains a new power. It has the ability to revert its opponent's actions back to 0. Whenever Diavolo attempts to attack Giorno, Requiem simply undoes his attack in a manner similar to rewinding time, to the point that it's as if Diavolo never did anything to begin with, and the activation appears to be automatic. It even undoes King Crimson, erasing time. Even if fate dictates that Giorno should be defeated, Requiem's ability will alter it in his favor. It is so overpowered. Granted, I can see some people disliking how powerful it is, but after all the shit that Diavolo has done, with him constantly boasting that he's invincible and destined to remain at the apex forever due to his overpowered stand ability, I relish in seeing him getting overwhelmed for once. Giorno, unleash absolutely everything you have on this bastard! So after the agonizing 3-week break for the finale, I got to see the results of Giorno not holding anything back against Diavolo. Now I've seen a number of super satisfying JoJo villain deaths so far, but I believe that Diavolo takes the spot for the most satisfying death by a mile. Because he doesn't die once. He dies more than that. Way more. Gold Experience Requiem's power traps Diavolo in some sort of alternate reality where upon dying, his death gets reverted to 0 to bring him back to life, only so that he can immediately die again in an infinite loop. There's no way for him to escape any of these deaths. He remembers every single death that came before, and the deaths being reverted to 0 prevents Diavolo from reaching the point after death. This has to be one of the most satisfying deaths I have ever seen in fiction. Diavolo being forced to continuously die for all eternity is beyond worse than any fate I could possibly imagine, with him being stuck in constant fear as he wonders how he's going to die next. Then in a sort of flashback sequence where I see Mr. deal with the stand Rolling Stones, I thought this was kind of randomly placed at first, but seeing that Rolling Stones prophesize Bruno, Abbacchio, and Naranja's deaths just before the events of the part had to make a lot more sense and was very eerie. But back in the present, I was so relieved to see that Polnareff managed to survive by having his soul live on inside Mr. President. Nobody else I love is going to die. Well, technically. And we get a moment regarding Mr. Scent.
逆に結構懐かしいななんて思ったりして。
そう
ええ。でも変な指。
Our friends are dead. Giorno chooses not to destroy the Requiem arrow as a sign of carrying on his fallen ally's will, and seals it away in Mr. President so it can't be used for evil. And in the end credits scene, Giorno becomes the new boss of Passione to finally achieve his dream, thus bringing about the end of Golden Wind. This part was truly something. I could still express my thoughts on this part for another couple of hours, but to put it in the simplest way possible, this part was demolito! I love all the main characters, which also makes the deaths some of the hardest hitting in the series. I love the Mafia theme and how it was utilized for the setting. The stand battles are among the best I've seen due to the insane amount of creativity and dynamic action they placed into each of them. The villains are so well written. I found the story to be super engaging, and even the things that I don't really talk about, like the animation, music, and voice acting, were so on point and godly. It even addressed some of the minor gripes I had with the previous parts, which weren't a big enough deal to be worth mentioning in their own videos, but seeing it improved upon here went such a long way. I adore pretty much every single thing about Part 5. Sure, I could probably nitpick on a few things here and there if I was actively trying to find something to complain about, but those do not concern me. On all the things that really mattered, this part was essentially perfection. It has so many absolutely awesome moments that both really resonate with me and instantly stick out in my mind whenever I think about JoJo, giving it tons of memorability for me, which is probably why so many videos related to Golden Wind are in my liked videos playlist. I already grew to love JoJo while watching the previous parts, but it was Golden Wind and how much I grew to adore it that made me say with complete confidence, I love JoJo. This part rubbed me in all the right ways with its storytelling to easily make it my favorite one, despite its strong competition. So it seems to be a running trend that I develop a deep love and obsession for the 5th installments in series that involve people fighting with spiritual beings. This part honestly holds a special place in my heart, just for how much fun I had watching it, and for making my Fridays even more enjoyable. Making me so glad that I was born in the right time to witness this. I loved it so much that part of me feels sad to see it end. My only hope would be for Purple Haze Feedback to get an OVA similar to how 2 of Rohan's spin-offs got OVAs. I know it's unlikely, but a man can dream. It's an awesome story. I was eagerly anticipating catching up to this part after I started watching JoJo, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. It truly was a gold experience.